Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. My name is Sarah, and today my co-host Carrie Bennett and I are going to be making these complex topics of quantum biology and circadian biology understandable to the everyday person. Thank you so much for tuning in. We ask that if you are listening on audio only, that you take a moment to leave us up to a 5-star review. And if you're on YouTube, leave us a like, leave us a comment. It will help to get the show out to more people. And before we jump into today's topic, just a quick reminder to head down to the show notes and check out my free resources as well as Carrie's free resources. We also do have courses on a variety of topics. If you are hoping to dive deeper, Carrie and I both have practitioner courses available as well for anyone who wants to begin to bring these topics to their clients and help them to implement these strategies into their daily lives. So check those out. We also have a co-taught course called Quantum Fertility that is available that allows people and practitioners to work on their fertility using these principles of quantum biology and circadian biology. Again, thank you so much for listening or watching today's show, whichever one you are doing. And let's go ahead and jump into it now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. Carrie and I are super excited to have Dr. Laura Koniver here, who was just recently on our Health Transformation Summit. And we thought we would have a really fun chat about longevity and grounding, but we'll see where it goes. So Dr. Koniver, welcome.
Oh, I'm excited to come back and talk to you about, we've talked a lot about short-term and instant benefits of grounding, but I mean, there's so much potential with the long-term benefits. So I'm really excited you guys invited me here for that topic.
Yeah. It's so great to talk with you, Dr. Koniver, because your earthing products are a game changer, right? I think that they are just such a high quality, and it really allows people the confidence of being able to get Earth's energy indoors, which I think is nice and convenient, especially for people who live in places like me in the winter where I'm in Michigan, right? I don't want to be barefoot all the time outside. And so this is just such a great thing to have access to because, we're just divorced from Earth's natural energy. And
And for everything we're going to talk about today is, if we're talking more of the long-term benefits, there really realistically anymore is not a way to have those long-term benefits if you don't have some type of indoor grounding product. It's just not our lifestyle anymore. And like you said, like whether it's temperature or hazards or allergens or whatever, there's so many reasons why. If you want the hours and hours and hours, and then you want that for weeks and then months and then years, you kind of, I mean, at the beginning, I was sort of against grounding products just because obviously, ideally, we'd be outside every minute of every day and sleep on the earth, but it's not going to happen. So I agree with you. I think mentioning about grounding products is a great idea because these benefits are the ones that accrue over years of grounding.
Exactly. And you're right. I think we've spoken extensively about like the instantaneous flow of charge and, and how over just minutes, it helps your red blood cells, get that zeta potential, that flow. But long term, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Humans were designed to literally be in constant contact with the surface of the earth.
100%. There's no time too long. Some people are like, more fixated on, is there any time too short? And not really, because like you said, there's instant, you'll feel benefits, but there is no time too long. We were not bubble plastic wrapped from the earth until the past, less than 2 centuries. So yeah, there's no time too long. It could be 24/7 and it's no time too long. And we'll go into today, like all the different benefits that accrue in your body when you're grounded for long periods of time.
Let's define long first. I think that'd be a good starting point.
That's great. Yes. Yeah. Because as we go into the studies, the medical studies, we have studies on instant, like under a second, milliseconds. We have studies on minutes, like 40 minutes. We have studies on hours. We have studies on sleeping. We have studies on weeks. We have studies on doing it for several months. But when I'm talking about these long-term benefits, I'm talking about looking at those benefits and what does the medical literature have to say about if we reduce inflammation decades later, what should that do? So we don't have studies on grounding for decades because there's no one funding this. And so until recently, there was no one even doing double-blinded studies on it because there's no pharmaceutical company funding this. So we don't have, although humans obviously have been grounding and in concert with the earth since the dawn of humanity, we don't have funded studies on this. So we have much shorter term because there's no, you don't get a penny for doing it. So nobody's set up yet medical studies that are double-blinded that go on for decades. That would be very hard to do. But what we can do is say, I know that grounding decreases C-reactive protein by 60%. What does the medical literature say on people who have that level of lower C-reactive protein? to their cancer risk, that kind of thing. So when I'm talking today, I'm talking about if we've done it for decades, what should our long-term benefits be? But they're extrapolated from the more short-term immediate studies that we do have.
Yeah. And just to clarify for people, I mean, no one, you're right. Funding, I think that typical study, they love like 6 to 8 weeks.
Right. Exactly.
Like there's funding for 6 to 8 weeks for anything that you're testing, any variable that you're testing, right? But much longer than that. It is rare unless you're going to get some sort of a longitudinal study asking people questions of how frequently did you touch the earth over the course of the, and like those are kind of rife with error. And so I do like this idea. So let's talk maybe a little bit, Sarah, if you're cool with this, like number one, what are the main effects we see, like, let's say biochemical markers we can test in before and after studies on earthing? And then let's maybe translate those studies in terms of long term.
Okay. And also I would have to say a statement about what we think we know about aging so far and why grounding would be specifically beneficial in both sides of that coin. So we can talk about that too if you think there's time. But the main areas we want to talk about is inflammation, because we know that has a direct impact on how the body ages. We want to talk about sleep quality, because we know that has a direct impact on how the body ages, and we have studies showing that with grounding. So we want to talk about muscle mass, because we know that that's basically, as we're older, where we preserve our stem cell regeneration. And so when you're younger, you get it from your bone marrow and you're producing it in your bloodstream. But when you're older, you really need to protect your muscle mass. And we know grounding does that. We can look at that. Cognition, that's one of the main things. Like I don't almost care how healthy my body is if I don't know, if I'm not oriented to meaning and time and place. So cognition is a huge one, and we can extrapolate from neuroinflammation and inflammatory cytokines and other shorter term studies what that would do to our dementia risk and cognition. And we actually just came out with another study showing cognitive benefits after just 1 month. Wow. And then lastly, this is going to sound really superficial, but it's not, because looking at skin, so cosmetically, it does increase circulation, and we know that it's this fast. Grounding through your foot increases capillary action within a second. So we know it's quick, but we now have longer term studies showing that applying that DC energy of the earth actually improves wound healing. And the reason that it seems like it's cosmetic, like, great, I'll have good circulation in my face, but it's not 100% really about that, because it's just a reflection of all your end organ systems. So if I'm boosting circulation, which means oxygen and nutrients to my skin in my face, I'm also doing that to every end organ system. So even talking cosmetically, we can then say what that probably is doing to every organ that runs off of blood, which is all of them in our body.
Perfect. So I love all those categories.
Yeah.
I mean, where's the best place to get started? I mean, maybe sleep, because of our community. I think that we talk a lot about sleep, circadian rhythm, and support, but I think this is going to be a little bit shocking to people that you can essentially reinforce circadian signaling through being grounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And I know you guys have pointed that out before, and that is so under talked about and underreported, because rightfully so, there's a lot of information and a lot of medical studies on the importance of the sun. And I really do think it's so important, and sun exposure does directly impact our circadian rhythm. And the main mechanism of action, although there's tons of them, but one of the most well-known is that it regulates melatonin, but the earth regulates cortisol. And so, and we know that from double-blinded studies where people are sleeping grounded, and within 8 weeks, like you said, the 8-week mark, but within 8 weeks, their cortisol, no matter what pattern they came with, very, very high, total adrenal failure, and totally very, very low. Every single grounded participant who slept grounded instead of sham grounded had normal cortisol. And so their sleep quality improved. And so there's something else I want to say about that. But first, I think that the earthing piece is really important, having your cortisol regulated by the earth, because even if you get that morning light and you take melatonin supplements and whatever you can do to be in that circadian rhythm with the sun, no matter how high your melatonin gets, if you're in absolute fight and flight, cortisol fatigue, there's no amount of melatonin in the world that will knock you out and let you sleep deeply if your cortisol is through the roof. So if I'm in stressed out mode and I'm laying there and I'm freaking exhausted, but I am wired, I might have good melatonin. I might have gotten my sun exposure that day. I might have exercised and got that fresh air. But if I didn't touch the earth in some way and my cortisol is this high, that's how we have our survival. Our cortisol and our anxiety and our stress is meant to override even exhaustion, even famine, even dehydration, even, fear. It's meant to keep us surviving. And so going. So if we needed to outrun that, thing that was about to eat me or whatever, I'm going to take that next step no matter how burnt out I am, because I have that cortisol. So that's why the grounding is so important long-term, because I can fix everything else. And if I still can't fix my sleep, it's probably cortisol, and you probably need to get grounded. And the last thing I'll say about sleep is that we also know that translates in longevity to long-term benefit, because there was a recent study, and to also say that it's never too late. So there was a recent study in elderly, I think they were 70 to 90 year age range, and they all had Alzheimer's, and they were on an Alzheimer's unit. And they did a grounding study, a double-blind placebo-based grounding study, where some were grounded and some were sham grounded. And the patients didn't know it, nor did the practitioners measuring the sleep quality, did not know which ones were grounded or not. And in the end, grounding and sleeping grounded significantly boosted their sleep quality, which does have protective cognitive benefits, which we can talk about in like a whole separate thing of cognition. But so even these people who that wasn't their part of their lifestyle, they were 75 years old, 80 years old, and they have Alzheimer's, and it still improved their sleep, introducing grounding. So it's never too late. And that's where I think some of the longevity benefits of grounding are going to come in, if we can ever get those really longitudinal studies we were talking about.
Yeah. I find that people are all really concerned about the night wake ups. I get that a lot in my community. I know Carrie does too. And one thing I've been telling people lately, it's women typically that are asking me this: how can I stop waking up and staying up and being up at night? I'm like, your body has an ingrained biological system where it thinks you need to hunt. So I wholeheartedly agree. It's cortisol that's typically waking people up. Now, there's multiple reasons for it. Is it your blood sugar? Did you not eat enough during the day? Are your minerals bad? Are you dehydrated? Like, so many different things. Are you just like living in a state of like fight, flight, stress? But it's definitely the body's like biological mechanism of being like, you need to go hunt, you know, And
like you said, for females too, like I remember when I used to have young kids, I kind of miss it a little bit, but not really for my sleep, because I just don't feel like I ever got deep sleep, because I was always waiting to hear if I could hear them, you know, like just even when I was asleep, I know I was just like, so it is women literally live on the edge, ready to defend their child or whatever, you know, even just biologically, like you said, just from, it could be work related, but just women are the ones who are the immediate response caretaker, like gonna fixer. Just on a hair trigger like that. And men typically don't. Like, you can knock them over the head and then they'll wake up and then they'll maybe do something. But like the women are like on it like that.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's sure. All good. So no, you're absolutely right about that. But also something that I found in terms of when people are sleeping grounded, I don't test a ton, but I do sample. Every once in a while, people give me tests of before and after cortisol melatonin curves. When people, so like you're talking about that assessment, I find it's almost like that has to do that really that in heightened stress response of like, gosh, the deadline at work or whatever, that can get dampened so quickly when you actually earth and ground regularly. And then the melatonin curve regulates itself as well. So it's almost like when people have that elevated cortisol in the evening, I see the melatonin spike or the natural melatonin surge happen much later into the evening. And so then these are people who like don't want to wake up in the morning and then get the morning sunlight that we're talking about, because they're still really feeling groggy. And so this is for people who, in spite of doing all the correct stuff with light, what about the fact that we're disconnected from Earth's signals that help us to signal time of day as well? So what is it, Laura, to tell people, what is it about Earth's changes, essentially maybe in electron flow or connection? What are the changes that we're experiencing on a 24-hour cycle with our connection to the Earth?
Oh gosh, we could do a whole show just on that. But we know that the Earth is producing multiple different natural EMF fields. So they're DC energy. They're not the artificial man-made AC energy that's disruptive. This is just a very gentle but natural pulse from the Earth. There's the Carnegie curve. That is a daily 24-hour rhythm. And it doesn't matter where you go. We've known this. This is why I feel like some of this information is suppressed because I didn't learn about this in medical school at all. But we've known this since the 1920s, and it's called the Carnegie curve because someone back in 1921 took a literal ship and went around the Earth measuring these electrical signals. And no matter where, in the middle of the ocean, everywhere. Wow. And no matter where they were, oriented to that time zone was a perfect 24-hour rhythm called the Carnegie curve. Oh, cool. And so when we touch So we're in this Schumann resonance, whether we're grounded or not. It's like a potential around us, which is comforting and soothing to us, which is why, like, if someone goes to, in a space shuttle, they approximate that with electrical equipment. They have like an actual Schumann resonance generator, so they don't have psychological problems and they don't have sleep difficulty. So even when you're not grounded, our body just lives in this gentle, natural EMF. But when you're grounded, that potential, that voltage, that field that we can measure turns into a current, just like plugging in a cord, and it turns into a current of amps. So that is then bringing that information into your body. And so
we want to talk a little bit about why we both use more red light therapy in the winter really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Come summer, it is so easy for me to pop outside for 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, take the clothes off and just soak up the natural light, right? And I know you do. I know you do the same. And it's beautiful because we're getting all of those red and near infrared wavelengths from the sun and imparting all those healing benefits from sunlight. But come, November, December in Michigan, there's very little opportunity for me to do that. It's just too cold, and so I'll go outside and get my light signaling through my eyes, but my skin really, that infrared and red that I want to absorb through my skin is just lacking. And so that's why I would highly recommend, if you live in an environment like that, you consider using a red light therapy panel in the winter. It can be the biggest game changer.
Yeah. And we both love the Bon Charge Mini. This is super convenient. You can take it with you traveling. You guys don't know, when I'm recording the podcast, half the time I have it on my low back or somewhere in my body to mitigate some of this blue light. And for the months of November and December, you can use the code QuantumPod25 for November and December only to get 25% off the panel or anything on the Bon Charge website. Carrie and I are both big fans.
Yeah. And one more thing really quickly with that. It's a great gift too, right? If you want to start getting people involved in this lifestyle and say it's the most convenient way, if there's a mom that you know who needs to tend to boo-boos and aches and pains for kids, or earaches, tummy aches, sore throats, it's a phenomenal gift to give as well, because it really can wipe away pain very fast.
I love it. All right, check it out. Link is in the show notes.
Elliptical pattern. So it also orients you to season. So if you travel, the first thing you should do is get off the plane if you're in a new time zone and connect with the earth there, and it will inform your body and you'll have much less jet lag. So, and then there's other studies and beyond that, but that's the most simple term, is that I would say the Carnegie curve really helps orient us in that 24-hour rhythm.
Love it. I love it. That's super helpful for people to know. I have never heard of that. I love new information. And so
I just wrote it down. I'm like, okay.
I did too.
Yeah. And like, what's crazy is like, that's from the 1920s. And what? Okay. Anyway.
Ridiculous. Fast forward to 30, and then plastic shoes were invented, right? Yeah, rubber soles, right?
Correct.
Very cool. So sleep, right? And so then obviously I think it's pretty obvious that how sleep benefits longevity, but do you have any really interesting data points that you want to bring up in terms of supporting that?
Well, just that sleep is associated with so many different markers of age. It really is an accelerant. And if you get good quality sleep, it literally does decelerate aging. Just even on going all the way down to your DNA and your telomeres that protect your chromosomes, the end caps, they wear away over time. They shorten over time. And you can actually guess someone's chronological age just by looking at their DNA, because how short are their telomeres on the end. And so good quality sleep protects that and can actually reverse it. So this was a study looking at anxiety disorders. But when people have anxiety, kind of like we talked about, when you're on this hair trigger, which I identify very strongly with, I've had anxiety my whole life. Like, unfortunately, that accelerates aging and the telomeres shorten. When you get good quality sleep and when you treat the anxiety, there was only if you did that and totally repaired the anxiety disorder, it was only a 6 months difference. So even if you'd had, again, this goes with aging, if you'd had anxiety your whole life, like many of us have had, if you feel better and you treat it and you get better sleep, you can reverse it. So aging chronological aging is very fluid. And a lot of it has to do with sleep. And there's multiple ways. Like sleep, you can't almost have a healthy weight if you're not sleeping well. You gain weight 9 times faster if you're not sleeping well. So it's not just it kind of plateau. It accelerates weight gain, and it's also been shown to accelerate dementia. And so just tons of other age-related changes just are accelerated when you're not having that restorative sleep at night. And we mentioned stem cells. So poor sleep disrupts DNA so much that there was a recent study that showed poor sleep made the stem cells DNA disrupted and damaged. So if you want to protect your stem cells, which is your body's way that it rejuvenates and refreshes your tissues and makes it be that you have another use, basically, as you wear and tear your body, you want to have like the ability to replace it with new cells, and that's your stem cells. And so poor sleep right then and there decreases your stem cell regeneration. So there's just a lot of ways.
Yeah. And then that stem cell talk actually, I guess, connects us to muscle mass. I'd love to hear then about how muscle mass is preserved if we're grounded.
Okay. So so everyone here is like, most people know, like how most people know the sun helps with circadian rhythm, but it's a little bit more of a story to it. So the same thing with muscle mass. People think exercise, and that I'm not invalidating that. Absolutely do exercise. Many studies have shown weight bearing exercise helps decelerate aging and preserves muscle mass, but it's not enough, because there are studies in top athletes showing that an athlete who's continuously training from the age 40 to the age 80 decreases their muscle mass in half still. So that's a top tier athlete, right? So I know I'm not exercising like that. So I know my muscle mass, I like exercising sometimes, but I can't rely on that to protect my muscles. So, and like we talked about at the beginning, muscles is where when we're older, we reserve our stem cells and protect and regenerate our stem cells. And so we want to protect our muscle mass. So grounding does that in so many different ways. Now, again, all we have are the shorter term studies, but in short-term studies, not only does grounding immediately, and I know we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but immediately decreases your muscle tension. But then when you look at that in like a blood study and looking at serum markers of muscle damage, which is your creatinine kinase levels, those go down by 50% if you were grounded while you were exercising and or if you used grounding immediately afterwards. So if you're protecting muscle damage and cutting it in half, and then you're doing that over a lifetime, every time you exert yourself. And then subjectively, of course, in these studies, they've also echoed that I have less muscle soreness and I recover quicker and that kind of thing. And this has been done over and over and over in studies. They did studies where people had strenuous yoga poses and they had to hold very strenuous yoga poses for an hour over and over again until they couldn't do it anymore and they were completely fatigued. There was ones where people had their body weight on barbells and had to do deep knee bends until total exhaustion. There was ones where they were downhill. I wouldn't want to do any of these. Downhill treadmill tests where they were running on a downhill treadmill to complete exhaustion. And they looked at those creatinine kinase levels and they were 50% less. So when they were grounded. So grounding literally is super, super protective to your muscles. And again, so then as a byproduct, when we can extrapolate is I'm going to get more stem cell protection and more stem cell use for longer because of those muscles. So it's not just exercise to protect muscle volume. Right. It's exercise plus grounding.
And when they're testing grounding, my quick question is like, what surfaces are they using? Are they using grounding tools? Are they outside on cement? Are they on grass? Like, are they in an urban environment?
Yes. Yeah. Phenomenal question. And this is why I can feel confident that these results are because of grounding. Because of course, if we could do like contrasting people outside barefoot versus people with shoes on,
right?
You know, there'd be benefits, but we wouldn't know it was just grounding, right? Because there's other, I'm looking at green trees, ions, right? Microbiome, all that stuff, right? So to know, and all the studies I'm talking about has distilled it completely down to just if you're electrically connected to the earth or not, is using an indoor grounding tool and then a ground cord that looks the exact same as a sham ground cord, so that the person like on the downhill treadmill test, they would have a grounding patch on their skin and a ground cord. But is it a sham ground cord, so they're not actually grounded, or a real ground cord? And even the researcher doesn't know. So they're collecting data and they don't know. So they're not biasing the data, and nor is the patient. If it's a sleep study, then they're sleeping on a grounding mat. So all the studies that I feel like really hold water, although again, I want people to go outside and get grounded, but so that I know the benefits are only from grounding. And also so that we know these benefits are then accessible by an indoor grounding tool, is because every medical study that's double-blind, placebo-based is using an indoor grounding tool with a fake ground cord and a real ground cord that is not any visibly different.
I think, Sarah, this is going to beg the question for our community. And I know you've answered this before, Dr. Koniver, but, there is, I think, a misnomer about attracting electromagnetic fields.
Yes, the electrosensitive.
Right. People. And so, and I've read enough of the research that you put on your website. You do a beautiful job of putting it out there in high non-native EMF environments where you show a benefit of being grounded versus not. And so I'm just wondering, can you just highlight some of this stuff? Because I think there is this fear that, oh no, if I'm grounding, I'm actually becoming an antenna for non-native EMFs.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right. And to not invalidate that feeling, because you can feel it when you're in man-made EMFs, and you do feel it more if you're grounded. So that's not to take away from people like, well, but I really feel I'm an antenna. But the thing is, you're not an antenna. Even if you're not grounded, you're still in those man-made EMF fields. So the key is to reduce the man-made EMF fields just by moving some appliances away, or while you're grounding, unplugging something, or using an EMF protective cord, or it's very easy to modify your internal environment to get away from electrical fields, which is the ones that impact, and people are saying they feel when they're grounded. It's not the Wi-Fi. I'm not saying that Wi-Fi is healthy. There's tons of studies showing any kind, because we're so conductive, anything that interferes with our conductivity does have health detriments. But the grounding is not making it worse. And in fact, the grounding is providing at least some of a counterbalance to it, because there are studies on infants in a NICU, which is basically a neonatal intensive care unit. So these are premature babies. They are struggling to be alive. They were born prematurely, so they can't regulate their body temperature, can't feed themselves. Their lungs are immature. Their organ systems are immature. So they're in incubators, and they have literally, and it's so sad, but they literally have power strips right next to the incubator to make sure that they have their NG tube to feed them, and their, cardiac monitoring, and they're getting the light for their liver, and they're getting, the warmth controlled so they're not freezing cold and losing body heat. So to basically incubate them, right, like as if they were in the womb. So they are in the most EMF dense environment possible in a NICU, and they're the most immature, like precious, vulnerable human being you could have. That in a very, very elderly person. Who just so vulnerable. And even in those studies, those infants, their markers of survivability went up when they were grounded. So you can rest assured, even in the most, and I'm sure some of those, probably all of those infants could feel the difference and would say, maybe I'm an antenna, but the markers of their survivability went up. Okay, so their heart rate variability and their vagal tone were boosted, which means it has benefit to their metabolism, their digestive tract, like all of their autonomic nervous system function. So benefit was there, even in the worst case possible. However, will you feel crappy? Yes. So get rid of the EMF. So I'm definitely not saying, what I don't like is there's some people who say that grounding magically protects you from them. No, it doesn't. There's no magic about it, and you want to reduce your EMF exposures as much as possible. However, they are not exclusive to each other. And so if you feel electrosensitivity symptoms, we want to look at the source of those symptoms, but still maintain the grounding.
Got it.
Sure. That was good.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I think that brought a lot of clarity to that. Where next, Sarah?
I guess with the sleeping grounded, that's another one where I see, just anecdotally in my community, some people do really well with grounding sheets. They swear by them. And then some people, they actually sleep worse. And it's just like really a bad experience. So I know that you're talking a lot about these health benefits with grounding. Is it the same thing where they just done kind of with grounding sheets? And then what do you say to the people who use the grounding sheets and actually like feel worse? Yeah.
That's a good question. So yes, those are still done in urban. I mean, no one's taking it out into the middle of a farmland with no,
those are my people who always feel good, like undoubtedly always feel good when they do grounding sheets, because they're using a stake in the ground
and they have a great lifestyle.
And I'm like, perfect.
Exactly.
But my city people,
But the studies where we show complete normalization of cortisol are all done in urban settings. Again, they're not taking their grounding tool to the middle of nowhere and just doing this pure grounding experience. They're in a controlled sleep study in a lab in a hospital. So they're still in those environments, and it's still showing your cortisol levels, every single one of them, not just 50% of them. 100% of the grounded test subjects had normal cortisol at the end of 8 weeks. So what you're feeling is the symptoms. And what I try and remind people is symptoms does not equal disease in the case of electrosensitivity. Symptoms means I can feel it. So just like you might be more sensitive, like you're that frog in the pot of boiling water and you can feel it getting hotter and someone else is like, and they don't feel it getting hotter at all and they're burning and they're scalding themselves. It's a bonus to be sensitive. I want to feel when the water's getting hotter. I want to protect my health. So if I get a headache when I'm in an electrical field or I feel exhausted or whatever, or if I'm grounded and I'm not sleeping as well when I'm grounded, thank goodness I picked up on the fact that now I know I'm in an electrical field. So what I really need to do is examine, am I in a sleep number bed and do I need to unplug it? Is there an extension cord going under my bed? What is near me? Is the lamp a little bit too close? There's some electrical field, or am I just using a standard ground cord that's letting it come up from the outlet? There's some electrical field that I'm introducing, which again is not negating the benefits of grounding, but it's making me feel crappy and it's making me feel like I'm not sleeping as well. And it's making my heart race or making my brain less, the brain waves shift into a more healing pattern, but I can feel like I'm having subjective, like racing thoughts and that kind of thing. So I would say I'm glad you're electrosensitive. I wish we all were, because it's to our benefit, because then we know to protect ourselves and to now examine and look for sources of electrical fields. And that's really, really important, because honestly, even if you decide to stop grounding, or for some people, when they're just like really like it just freaks them out, which I don't blame them. I don't think anyone should do anything that freaks them out. If they don't want to sleep grounded, that's fine. Move that grounding tool off your bed and put it on your sofa, or take it to the office and sit on it. Like, do it during the day then, where you're not sitting there laying in bed freaking out about, move your grounding then routine to the day. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, like that Carnegie curve, it's not necessarily, we don't know, and I don't think it is necessarily better to be grounded while I'm sleeping. There's studies showing people grounding during the day improving their sleep at night, because that Carnegie curve is telling me it's during the day. And if I'm grounded at night, it's telling me I'm grounding it at night. So it's syncing you up. So if you don't like sleeping grounded and you're having symptoms, ground during the day, but still even if you decide to make grounding not part of your sleep, oh my gosh, still get those EMFs out, still get that electrical cord, still unplug your bed, still get the cord away, because you're still messing your central neurology up and you're not even having the benefits of grounding while you're asleep. So I think even if you use grounding as just that red flag to go around and see where am I feeling symptoms, and then taking those seriously, you're going to improve your health, even if you don't actually use the grounding tool afterwards, but you're just flagging where are all of my exposures. So it's to me it's not alarming to get an electrosensitivity symptom. I think it's actually to a benefit.
And part of me also just wonders too, in terms of these studies, I haven't looked at the data in terms of what the cortisol curves and them normalizing, but I'm wondering, did some people normalize their curves a lot faster? Did it take other people a longer amount of time? And so sometimes there is this idea of duration and needing to be under this routine of grounding at night for a certain duration, or in order for your body to be like, oh, the signal that I'm getting right now is nighttime. And I'm going to stop making cortisol. And so I'm going to allow my melatonin. And so I'm just wondering if there is something about, it might not happen the first night or the second night or even a week. It might take a little bit of time. And I think the tendency for people, understandably so, who have been going through these chronic healing journeys is like, I don't want to do anything that might possibly send me backwards in any capacity. So and understandable.
Totally get that. Absolutely.
Okay, so in terms of the muscle mass, anything else that we want to talk about? Now, I know you speak about muscle. I'm curious about the fascia. You automatically said that the muscle tension reduces almost instant. Did you say instantaneously or pretty close?
It's instantaneous. It's less than a second, milliseconds.
Wow.
So to me, in the language that I use, to me, that's better hydration in the fascia, right? To be able to handle a healthier length tension relationship. So I'm kind of under the assumption that if this is going to show this type of a benefit to muscle mass, it also has to be providing a benefit to the fascia as well. Is there any studies out there that indicate that?
There is not, but I love that you brought that up and specifically using that term. That's so awesome of you, because again, you don't hear about, that very often unless you happen to like Bowen therapy or you have specific knowledge about fascia, because most people don't talk about it, but you are 100%, you just nailed it. Every part of your body is conductive. And actually, if you think of the fascia and the connective tissue, which surround every single organ system and every single joint and every single vasculature, like everything in your body is connected by fascia. And fascia is a semiconductor. So I believe one of the reasons the body is instantaneously grounded like that is not because it's like traveling through the bloodstream or what. It's using the connective tissue. It's like a fiber optic network. And it's not even just the fascia that like we can see between organ systems. Even the cell membrane and the cytoskeleton of the cell that keeps it 3D is like a fiber optic system that grounds instantaneously. It's all connective tissue, all of it. And so, yeah, there's not studies looking at specifically grounding fascia, but there's studies looking at overall inflammation and like joint wear and tear, osteoarthritis, pain levels, and all of those are related to. And there's even one preliminary study looking at bone density and being grounded, protecting bone density. So even bones are like the cement outside. They allow grounding right through. So literally your whole musculoskeletal system is grounded instantaneously. So I love that you brought up the fascia, because I think of that as like the like the fiber optic stuff. Yeah, exactly. And so how does that, and when we're talking about aging, oh my gosh, as we get older, it gets more fibrotic and our joints have wear and tear. And I mean, even the synovial fluid in your joints gets grounded, just like the electrical bath, that cerebrospinal fluid that your brain is sitting in. That's like, it's just not a coincidence that everything's an electrolytic solution waiting to be grounded. So that's grounding your brain as it floats there. And every joint, every little capsule of every joint that's filled with synovial fluid instantly grounded. And it's grounded because that fascia just sped it right there. And those bones got grounded, and the connective tissue and the ligaments and tendons, the muscles, all of it immediately grounded. Yeah, so I love that you brought that up. Obviously, you know your stuff obviously, like, I know you know that.
It's my thing. I love fascia. Yeah, fascia. I was like, it's like, do we have hundreds of different muscles, or is it one muscle just divided up by a lot of different fascial compartments?
That's cool. I never thought of it that way, but that's probably more accurate. That's really cool.